Hello, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever in the world you are. Welcome to this program. Tonight, we'd like to address the issue of how Zanu PF leaders, from Mugabe to now Mnangagwa, have managed to con Zimbabweans into believing the country is a healthy and functioning democracy. Welcome to you, Benjamin.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, good morning to our viewers, wherever you guys are. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much, Benjamin. Do you want to kick off the discussion, and then we focus on how did Mugabe convince his fellow ZANU PF members to agree to creating this de facto one-party state?
I believe it's there was an illusion that was created that within ZANU PF, by creating structures and so forth, that it appeared as if it was a democracy within the party, and then going out towards outside the party, which is Zimbabwe as a whole. The whole election process was meant to look like it's a functioning democracy. Yet when you look closely within ZANU PF itself, the guy went for 40 something or 37 years without being opposed. So if you look at that day, you could see within ZANU PF itself, you could not, he was unchallenged. There was nobody that could vie for the for the presidency within ZANU PF. So it was just an illusion, and this same illusion was created as to Zimbabwe as a whole, where you find there are structures or their institutions that should be performing what we would characterize as a democratic election. But then you find out that those same institutions that were supposed to be free from any political manipulations, institutions like ZEC were all captured. So there was not really.
Let's concentrate on ZANU PF for the time being.
Okay.
Are you saying ZANU PF is a democratic party?
No, it's meant to look like a democratic party, but it's not. There's no democracy in ZANU PF. Once you're the top guy, you are the top guy for. No, you go unopposed. There's not even a chance where you can even try and elect somebody to try to run to counter you, or let's say to an opponent, basically, for the presidency. You can form your guys structures there and do it whilst you're in the cells, the Politburo and all that there, to try and find who will go into these other. But when it comes to the top, which is the presidency, no, it's untouchable. So it's not a democracy.
Well, the party itself, actually, when it was founded, I don't think they even pretended they wanted it to be a democratic party. It was molded on the template of the Chinese political system, the Chinese Communist Party under Chairman Mao, where the leadership is unquestioned, unchallenged, and they have got total control of everything. I think in Zimbabwe, Mugabe, when he got into power, he managed to achieve that by how quickly he used the nation's wealth as if it was his own personal property. His ministers were given cars, Mercedes-Benz limousines and privileges and so forth that were not even discussed in cabinet, approved by cabinet or budgeted for. And this became the standard, this system of political patronage. And when you are totally dependent on the leader, that undermines your own position. Because even the various positions in the leadership of Zanu PF, take for instance, there is the first secretary, which would have been Mugabe himself, and then there is the chairperson of the party and so forth. You'll find Mugabe had always managed to maneuver the electoral process in such a way that he not only appointed the chairperson and his lieutenants, but made it very clear that they got that position because of him. And in some cases, they would be equally competent people, even more competent people, but you will overlook them to appoint somebody like Simon Musenda, for instance, as his second in command. When he was asked, why did you appoint Simon Musenda, he was saying, oh, we want to have a tribal balance. We want the people in Mashingo to have a leader too. And to appoint Simon Musenda is laughable, Of all the Mashingo leaders, Simon Musenda was the last one. If they were asked to appoint who they would want to lead them in Mashingo, they would have never appointed Simon Musenda. But Mugabe was using that to his own advantage. I mean, the other area where we could look at is how his cabinet operated. I don't know whether you want to say something about that one, Ben.
I agree with you when it comes to how Mugabe managed to have a firm grip of his party, including all the structures and everything. I don't see even the purpose of cabinet, because he actually basically detected to them what goes and what shouldn't. It's everything has to pass through him. At the end of the day, it's like the buck stops by me. So I really don't see. There was no democracy, or there was no. It was meant to appear as, but there was nothing at all. That's what I think, because I mean, how you would hear that Zanu PF is going to election or to Congress. Congress is meant to go and elect, but then it was a foregone conclusion before you even got there. And if you seemed to gain popularity, it was very, very difficult for you to come back from Congress. That's what we knew, and that's what usually happened. You would go, you would make it, but on your way back, something terrible would happen to you. So that's just how it played about when it came to how Mugabe used to operate his mission.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to cabinet itself, cabinet was such a rubber stamping body to the point of being utterly useless. One of the times when this was really shown so graphically was during the Kukura Wundi period, it's amazing how none of the cabinet members ever said, no, this is not right. At the time when you could tell Gukura Wundi was not about um, fighting dissidents, it was more about coercing Joshua Nkomo and his SAPO to form to sign the unity accords so that they could launch the de facto one-party state. And none of the cabinet members really stood up to Mugabe at all throughout that period. And in fact, the greatest criticism of that weakness was made by Margaret Dongo when she, at one point, called her fellow cabinet members, MPs and cabinet members. I don't think she was ever a cabinet member. A fellow MPs and cabinet members that mesimuru akazi wa Mugabe. And basically what she meant is they were so frightened of him. No one ever challenged him. They were more like the concubines of the Sultan, absolutely, utterly useless. And she was right, and that was the Mugabe that Zanu PF created, but this went on to the opposition as well. And before we discuss that one, I thought I will play this video from Barack Obama talking on the same issue of elections that have become utterly useless, just symbolic tokens. Let's just listen to this one.
Stop pretending that countries that just hold an election where sometimes the winner somehow magically gets 90% of the vote because all the opposition is locked up or can't get on TV is a democracy. Democracy depends on strong institutions, and it's about minority rights and checks and balances and freedom of speech and freedom of expression and a free press and the right to protest and petition the government and an independent judiciary and everybody having to follow the law.
That's interesting. How did Mugabe manage to create the illusion that Zimbabwe was a democracy in terms of deluding the opposition, in your opinion?
All the structures, I would like to believe all the structures that form a democracy or a democratic election are in place. But the question is, are they impartial, right? Are they free? Are they fair? That is where the question is. Because I mean, look, you have got ZEC, which is supposing to be independent. You have, let's say, there's a disagreement while during your whole process and everything. You should be able to have a judiciary that that you both can, that is out to get the truth and do the will of the people. The judiciary is there, but is it free? No. So it's just a shell that is there, but there's nothing inside. So that is the illusion that Mugabe created. They say, I know you can come and anybody, even up to today, it's come, the more the merrier. Come, let's all have, go for it and try and we'll see who wins the election. So now it creates an illusion that this guy is a very good guy. He's inviting challenges to say, it's an open bout. Come, let's all, survival of the fittest. But that is just a facade. There's no such thing like that. At the end of the day, like he says, the numbers would be so cooked up. It's just ridiculous. The media tends to be one-sided. None of you guys are ever spoken about. If any time you are spoken about, it's bad, you know. So it's and I don't know how the opposition fell for it, because it's pretty evident to me or to any other person except they themselves. I mean, the European Union don't buy it. The the West don't buy it. It's just them that buy it, because maybe I don't know what drives them, but for me, probably it will be greed to try and also get as much as they can for themselves, just like what Mugabe was doing. We want control. They also want the power and the perks that come with the power.
Yeah, I think the way Zanu PF has managed to delude the opposition into believing that Zimbabwe is a healthy and functioning democracy was particularly notable during the GNU. What Mugabe did, and did successfully, was first of all to bribe Morgan Tsvangirai and his fellow MDC friends with the trappings of high office, and made them feel that they were now part of the ruling elite, and so they didn't want that class to be disturbed. And then number two, he somehow managed to convince them that the opposition they are so popular, they could win elections without having to bother with the problems of having free, fair, and credible elections, with the problems of having to implement reforms to ensure free, fair, and credible elections. And this, unfortunately, is the delusion that MDC have carried to this day. I think deep down inside, Morgan Tsvangirai honestly believed that he was going to win the 2013 elections without reforms. So when the SADC warned him that he was not going to win them, he needed to pressure to not to participate in these elections until reforms were implemented. He genuinely ignored that, because he looked at his rallies and the masses of people attending his rallies, and he was convinced he was going to win the elections. And so up to today, we are still caught up in that vicious cycle where Chamisa and company still believe that they have got winning in rigged election strategies that have never worked, that are just an illusion. And so, it's self-perpetuating. You believe you can do it, and so you continue to do it. But the other issue, of course, why Chamisa and company have participated is, I think they genuinely know the elections are being rigged, and they still participate out of greed. This we have discussed in yesterday's discussion. You remember it, Ben?
Yes, I think that is unquestionable, because he sometimes utters it even during his speeches. So I think they are very much aware of what the goings on, but that will not deter them at all.
Yeah, I mean, this is the quotation from David Coulthard from his book After the 2013 Elections, in which he clearly admits that the 2000 election process was so flawed, so illegal, that the only logical step was to withdraw, which would have compelled SADC to hold ZANU-PF to account. But such was a distrust between MDCT and MDCN that neither could withdraw for fear the other would remain in the election, winning the seats and giving the process credibility. In other words, the opposition deep down, they've known that they can't win these rigged elections, but they've continued to participate out of greed. So that is the tragedy of Zimbabwe. But to come back to the same issue, to the same theme again, how did ZANU-PF manage to fool the ordinary Zimbabweans, particularly the intellectuals, into believing that Zimbabwe was a healthy and functioning democracy? Ben.
If you had said how did he manage to convince the Pope, it would have been an obvious case. How he managed to convince even the intellectuals is just mind-blowing. It's it's tragic because you try and see from their vantage point to say, okay, why do you keep on participating regardless? It's so evident that this process is flawed, and this whole election is not even close to a democracy, to an extent that when an observer leaves and he sends you 23 corrections, that is no joke. That's a lot. It means you are so far away from being near democracy. So I really don't know why the intellectuals, people that are supposed to know better, are fooled by this mirage. Let's say it's just amazing. For me, I really don't have. I've been trying to get the answers, but I can see it's just probably just desperation.
Well, I think one of the main reasons why the intellectuals and the professionals out there, Zimbabweans, have continued to participate in these flawed elections, pretending, as former President Obama said, that it is a democracy, is Zimbabweans have been, I think, one of our greatest weaknesses is opportunism. Even soon after independence, when they realized that Mugabe was not interested in free, fair, and credible elections, in respecting the rights and freedoms of all individuals, they were willing to go along. The best they could do was to say nothing and just go along. The worst, of course, that they did was, if you can't beat them, join them. Some of ZANU-PF's leaders, even to this day, are intellectuals who were invited and they could not refuse the offers to occupy high positions in government. People like Professor Mthuli Ncube, I mean, he knew ZANU-PF rigged the 2018 elections, but he wanted to pretend as if ZANU-PF had been democratically elected, and he was being invited to be the Minister of Finance. As Minister of Finance, I'm sure it would have taken him long to realize that corruption was one of the biggest problem killing the country. But he was told by his political mentors that corruption is untouchable. Don't touch there, don't touch there, don't touch there. So in the end, he ended up being Minister of Finance, managing the part of the economy involving the street vendors. He went after the street vendors, trying to squeeze, a dollar out of them. Any transaction they made, he wanted a cut of it, 2%. It's unbelievable. Most of those people, in fact, all of those people were street vendors. Strictly speaking, they should be on social welfare. And yet he went after them so that they could make a contribution to the national coffers. And yet the people who were benefiting millions of dollars from the diamond industry, the gold industry, he has never touched them. It's not that he doesn't know there is serious looting in those industries. He knows. But he's an opportunist. He was told you don't touch there, so he didn't touch anything. So that was one of the problems we have with some of our intellectuals. But the other one is, of course, that the intellectuals are incredibly short-sighted and naive, because at the end of the day, the collapse of the country's economy has affected them as much as it has affected the ordinary people, because most of them have found themselves in a situation where they are just as poor. I mean, look at this hyperinflation. Most of them are the ones who are caught up in it. It's only the few well-connected ruling elite who have benefited from all this mismanagement and chaos. Even their future is not certain. Most of them, you'll find, they always have plans of how to get out of the country. And when it comes to their education of their children and their health care, they've sent their children outside the country because they know that Zimbabwe's future is precarious, to say the least. So that is the reality. But I totally agree with you. It is mystifying how an intellectual had managed to go along with this idiotic position that has left the country now being one of the failed states. And most of these intellectuals have themselves ended up leaving the country. They are now refugees, economic and political refugees outside the country, which is tragic. But let's also go to why did the Povo, why do they believe Zimbabwe is a healthy and functioning democracy?
And I think, the Povo really don't know some of them were asked what are sanctions, and the answers that you got there were not just shocking, but rather amusing too, right? So you find these are the same guys when Mugabe, and including the intellectuals, when Mugabe was ousted and outsmarted by the La Costa team. Everybody, including the intellectuals, were all up in the streets, and the Povo were the ones that were leading from the front. They had since forgotten that it's just the same thing. These guys, they worked hand in hand. This one was it was just the high ranking officer to the other, and it was just a change of office, but it's just the same thing. And it's just the same thing. You can look at it now. It's still the same people that are so excited about Kasukuere that that is coming through the ranks. They've since forgotten that this is the same guy that was beating them. So for the Povo, they're gullible. they are not just short-sighted, but very short-sighted, and they don't research for themselves. They are easily, if you come and you say something that excites them, they quickly, quickly follow you. It's just how the Zimbabwean povo is. And then you find they are our old uh, grannies in the rural areas, and our grandfathers there, that really, we can't expect them to know what even democracy is, because from Smith's time, there was no democracy for them. The only time they thought, it was for them to vote, I think they only voted once. That was in 1979, 1980, to get independence. After that, the whole thing of democracy. So this is what they know for their lifetime. And unfortunately, if we do not change it, this is just going to be what most people know for the rest of their lives. And the youth are going to follow suit. And for them, it will appear as if this is what democracy means. They would know no better. They don't have the chance to watch, satellite TV and see how other countries are conducting their elections. To them, elections is, forceful running, and food and all that. So that doesn't really spell out what democracy is, a democratic election is. For me, that's what I think. They know no better.
I totally agree. I think most of them, President Obama there was right to say democracy means strong democratic institutions that are independent, like SEC, the police, and so forth. Most of these ordinary people, they don't understand that. And but there are some things that you should think could even they would understand. Um, they understood that elections should be about them casting uh, a vote, and that their vote is their secret. But by now, even they should have figured out that their vote is no longer a secret. And I think it is them also who should stand up, particularly with the opposition, and when the opposition tell them stupid things like, oh, Operation Green Mango, they'll tell them that is nonsense. Our vote is no longer our secret, because these people are frog marching us to polling stations. There are so few at that polling station that they will know how each one of us have voted. So some of it is really not rocket science at all, and they should also know free, fair, democratic elections do not mean people being beaten up, being harassed as they are, and to keep on believing Chamisa's nonsensical, oxymoronic nonsense of we have got strategies of winning rigged elections. And when you ask them what are they, he can't explain to you. I think it really is not rocket science at all. Even the people in the rural areas should start to question themselves. No, this is not right. And for them to think they can still somehow uh, achieve meaningful democratic change by soldiering on, sacrificing themselves, uh, is unbelievable. And this is one of the weaknesses of our in our political system, that the individuals themselves, be they intellectuals or powerful and so forth, they really have not stopped to think for themselves. And that is a serious weakness in any society, because yes, people needs to be educated, but there are some things that you can say, this is not a question of you need education, you need to have some common sense. some of the rural people, for instance, they should know what is happening is not right. People being beaten up and many killed. You can say to yourself, this is not right. Yes, they cannot take Zanu PF on their own, but nonetheless, they should take the opposition, because they should tell the opposition, you are the one who is leading us into dangerous territory here. You cannot keep on telling us that you're going to win big and we should soldier on, when we know doing so will cost us our lives. People are being beaten. What are you doing about that? That does not require somebody to have a university degree to figure that one out. It's just common sense. So I think that is the problem we have in Zimbabwe. And I think this issue of pretending we've got a functioning political system, unfortunately, it's one we have got to solve. Because once you've attained your independence, that's it. You have got to make the system work for yourself. Nobody's going to come in and tell you what to do. When MDC guys failed to implement reforms during the GNU, SADC shrugged their shoulders. Earlier on, you were talking about how the European Union, in their report in 2018, came up with the 23 reform recommendations. None. Zanu PF, for obvious reasons, did not take them seriously. The opposition, you think they are the ones who would have taken up and demanded that those recommendations should be looked at and implemented. They did not. And then the ordinary people, the intellectuals themselves, did not. And the ordinary people, the Povo, who are the core face of this failed state, they have said nothing. So the international community, the European Union, have shrugged their shoulders as well. What else do you want us to do? And I think that is where we are as a country. Unless we really pull up our socks, we are not getting out of this hellhole for a while, at least. It could be generation before we get out of it, if we ever at all going to get out of it. And we are never going to get out without implementing reforms. That is my parting word to the listeners tonight. We are not going to recover as a country without implementing reforms. Thank you very much, Ben. Would you like to say good night to the listeners?
Thank you very much. Yeah, I would like to say also good night. And just a last word, for democracy to prevail, we at least need to have, what even Obama is saying, the former president of America, what he's suggesting. It's not just about just going to elections and casting a ballot or a vote. It needs us to have some of these features that are present, so that at least they can, at the end of the day, there can be traceability, there can be accountability to the whole process, and give meaning to the whole process. Not just, let's just go and try because we've got ABC countermeasures and we've got ABC tricks. No, that's not how democracy works. That's what I would like to say. And good night.
Thanks again, Ben. Good night, everyone.